Hi, my name's Kam McQuay. I'm a partner with Blue & Company, and I work a lot with our dental practices in not only getting started with their operations, but also managing their practices and operation throughout their business cycle. So glad to be here with you today.
Well, I know you assist many dentists starting their practices. You also assist them in managing their operations. What is some basic advice you can give dentists while managing the practice?
You know, when dentists start into their practices and start to manage their practices, probably one of the biggest issues is they just have to be ready to deal with issues. That's just something that most business people understand. Most of the dentists I know are very positive, outgoing, enthusiastic type of individuals, and to deal head-on with some issues, especially non-clinical issues, is often difficult. So that's something I try to encourage all our dentists to do, whether they're just starting out their practices or have been in operations for 20 years, is that they deal with issues and deal with them straightforward, honestly, but they don't sweep them under the rug. Problems are not like fine wine. They don't get better with age. The quicker they're dealt with in the straightforward manner, the better the situation usually turns out to be. You know, when we're dealing with issues, sometimes people ask me, Cam, what are some of the things I should watch out for whenever I'm trying to make some decisions? And one of the things I think is the simplest thing I can think of is just dealing with back-end costs when you're trying to manage a dental practice. Back-end costs, and I'll give you an example. A copy machine is a great example of a back-end cost, where somebody will approach you and say, hey, we need a new copy machine. And that sounds like a good idea. You're currently leasing a machine for $100. The new machine's going to cost $125. So that's $25 a month, $300 a year, and you kind of base your decision based on that fact pattern. However, there's a lot of back-end costs associated with that decision. So you think you've made a $300 decision, but in the end you find out that it's a color copier. So while the lease is only $25, it's a color copier, and people are, instead of making 1,000 copies, are now making 2,000 copies a month, which increased your paper cost. Plus, instead of buying one toner cartridge, you need 4 toner cartridges. And those cartridges are not $30, but they're $45. So that $300 decision that you made per year now turned into a $1,000 decision whenever you look at all the back-end costs. So that's something I try to at least understand whenever I try to make those decisions. You know, whenever you're making those decisions too, and I'm using a copy machine as an example, I also look for the issue of the Me Too syndrome. You know, you get a copy machine, or better yet, a computer monitor for one person. Oh, it's just a short walk before 2 or 3 other people are going to want the same monitor. You also deal with this issue depending on the type of person you hire, whether you hire an experienced person or you hire somebody that fills a low-end job. Still a very important job, but typically low-end jobs will take the resources that they have around them and utilize that resource. However, if you hire a high-end person, much like an office manager, you will find that they will look at a situation, look at a problem, and when they come up with a solution, that solution is probably going to entertain some type of additional expenditure. You need this resource, you need to order this, we need to do this process differently, and that's going to cost money. That's probably why you hired that person, but you need to understand when you hire a person of that experience or capabilities, there's probably going to be some cost associated with that. So whenever I look at dealing with issues and trying to make cost decisions, I try to keep that in mind. You know, there's probably also one other thing, and this is really much of an accounting term or a financial term, and that is the internal rate of return for a project. You know, if you bought a new machine like a pano, now you probably bought that machine and said, I need the pano because that's a standard of care. I need to provide that for my patients. However, since it's a machine, we can probably say, okay, it costs you X amount of dollars, and over time you're going to recoup that by the tests and the processes that you utilize that machine for. That's fairly common, though not often done for a dental practice. In fact, I would even say you need to do that for non-equipment purchases. For capital expenditures, equipment purchases, it's easy to do a rate of return. No different than if you invested in a stock. I put $100 into a stock. A year later, I have $105. I've got a 5% rate of return. Well, we should be able to do the same thing, not only with the equipment we buy, but also with the people we hire. Hygiene would be a classic case, where if I've hired a hygienist, I expect a rate of return on that hygienist, not only on the salary, but all the supplies and overhead they use. Generally, people think in those terms, but they don't actually run the numbers. And my encouragement would be, whether you're starting out or have been in practice for 10 years, you need to look at the different things you're doing as part of the dental practice and look at the rate of return you're earning on each of those items.
Do you have any thoughts on managing employees?
Yeah, whenever you're managing employees, there's a lot of stuff that you will probably learn throughout your career. Probably one of the basic things I try to do with employees is just to share my vision for the practice. A lot of dentists, you'll have your morning huddle where you'll get through and you'll discuss the patients coming in, and that's more of a scheduling exercise. That's not a bad thing to do. I think a lot of very productive and successful dental practices have very good huddles, either every day or 2 or 3 times a week. But that doesn't take the place of sharing your vision. Why do you practice dentistry? What kind of dentistry do you want to practice? What kind of emotional feeling do you want the patient to have that comes into your practice? Those things aren't done just by accident. And generally what I found is most of my dentists know exactly how they'd like to practice dentistry, but they just fail to adequately share that information with their employees. So that's something I'd encourage. I'd also encourage most of my dentists to look at it from a business perspective and figure out what they need to do to create an environment for productivity. Everybody's different. Different staff members are motivated in different ways. And as an employer, as their coach, it's your job to figure out how to motivate each and every one. Some it's a kind word, other it's giving them resources. Some of them just need some additional training and really get excited by that additional training. But after that additional training, they want to actually show what they can do. So it's very important to be able to create an acceptable environment for each and every one of your employees so they can be successful.
From a high-level perspective, is there anything that all dentists or dental practices should be doing to be successful?
In managing a dental practice, there's probably 2 parting thoughts I'd have. One is, whenever you start in a dental practice, your first year, you're really trying to manage cost. Cash is king, so you're trying to manage that cost. By the second year, you're building revenue, you're trying to figure out how to expand effectively, you're probably putting in a 3rd or maybe even a 4th operatory, and while cost is important, you're finally getting that revenue stream. And usually in year 3 or 4, you're finally bringing that practice to somewhat of an early maturity, and that's very exciting. And now maybe you get a chance to look at your internal rate of return on projects, or you get a chance to look at what you need to invest in next. And then ultimately, you find out that your overhead is somewhat fixed, and it's all about creating additional revenue stream. How can I see another patient per day? And you start to monitor that and keep track of that, which is very important. But during that cycle, you start out by controlling costs, and you end up managing revenue. And that's a fairly normal cycle. It takes about 5 years to get there. Through that process, what I encourage practices to do is, instead of trying to manage profit, which is something you keep an eye on, it's very important, especially for the first 5 years, I try to build value instead of managing profits. If I'm building value, patients are going to come back. If I'm building value, the service that I render is going to be at the top end of the scale. If I'm building value, I'm creating a legacy for my practice that's going to last more than just 5 years. So while profits are important, and heck, from an accounting perspective, profits are pretty important, I would rather build value for my team and value for the patient, more than I'm worried about the bottom line for the practice. I also think that as you're trying to go through this process, whether it's starting your practice or running your practice, from a business perspective, I think it's also very important that you surround yourself with a group of people that you can rely on. Most dental practices, about 85% of dental practices, have one dentist. They're sole practitioners. There are several groups, onesie, twosies, twos, threes, and maybe beyond. Oral surgeons would be the exception, that they usually tend to group up. But most practices are solo practitioners. And because of that, they don't have a lot of people they can run ideas by. They're in a ship all their own, and they're the captain. So I would recommend that you surround yourself with attorneys, accountants, a financial advisor, a banker that is able to support you in this endeavor. And maybe you use them or talk to them once or twice a year, maybe more frequently. What you usually find out is if you invest in these people, they'll invest in you. And over time, you can learn to gain a respect for them as well as trust them with their advice. And know which ones to go to for which time. So I would encourage you that. Probably the last person you should have on that list is a mentor. That can be somebody on the financial side or on the business side. It could be another dentist. I would encourage you to align yourself early with that, and over time you will start building a relationship with those individuals that will ultimately prove successful to your dental practice.
What has been your experience working with ddsmatch?
In working with ddsmatch, they provide transitional services both for doctors who are selling and doctors who are looking to buy a practice. As we have referred clients on both ends of the spectrum, they've done a real good job of not only matching them up, but they seem to have a good experience with not only dealing with the dentist. They absolutely know the dental field more than any other broker here in the state, and I found that to be very positive because they know the environment, they know the dentist probably by name, and they know what they're looking for, both if they're trying to sell or if they're trying to buy, and that's proven to be successful in making a marriage of these transactions.